Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another Game and Gadget podcast. The guest list, well, it's very similar to the last one, indeed. So, Tony, I'm going to give a shorter introduction after the last time. We went into some detail, but basically, all these gents, high caliber, development background, modern, retro, Stoo, artist extraordinaire. If you want a pixel somewhere, Stoo's your man. This is it for the Game and Gadget podcast. On this particular episode, and of course, you've got me, James Woodcock, from pixelrefresh.com. Okay, gents, I'm going to jump in very quickly. I say quickly with the best of intentions, but it might not work out that way. I have purchased an iPad Pro. I have not had an iPad since iPad 3. So let's go rewind a little bit. So it's already getting too long already. Let's rewind a little bit and put some context into that. So iPad 2 was the first iPad I ever got. iPad 1, it was like first generation. It's a bit like the first iPhone. It showed potential, but it probably wasn't the one to get. iPad 2 came out super thin compared to the first iPad, and it just seemed to have everything right. Loved it. iPad 3 came out next, and that was the one with the Retina display, which meant it was lovely, high resolution, but ran absolutely rubbish, which is probably why, much to my despair, just 7 months later, Apple released the iPad 4 with a twice as fast processor in it. Thank you, Apple. But anyway, so that's my iPad history, and that's as far as I got. And I've found in all this time I've not needed another big screen tablet. Phones have got bigger and bigger over time. That was kind of my consumable touchscreen interface of choice. But then there's iPad Pro, and it's got a 12.9 inch display. Now, my phone is big, being an S21 Ultra, but it isn't 12.9 inches. And I was craving, as an Android user, a bit of iOS. So I thought the iPad Pro was the way to go. And Tony, at this point, you're not allowed to talk about my microphone issues on Windows 11, where I could not get the drivers to work all of a sudden. Hence why I'm using a Mac today. That's another story completely, Tony. Do not go there. So I looked at the iPad Pros. And there was an offer on at John Lewis we could get over a number of amounts of months. Interest-free. I thought, okay. And, of course, I did what you shouldn't do. I thought, okay, there's the iPad Pro. There's the smaller screen version. Oh, that one doesn't have the fancy new display technology of mini LED. That's only in the 12.9 inch display version. Okay, that must be the one I'll have to get, because I'm going to have this iPad for years and years, so I've got to get a really good one. And then, of course, Apple is quite stingy with the storage, so you have to go up a level with the storage to get 256 gigabytes. So, yeah, it wasn't the cheapest acquisition in the world ever, but at least it was split over a number of months. But I think the thing that appealed to me now more than ever was it has this new fandangled Apple M1 silicon in it. Now, this is all fantastic until the M2 is probably announced in a week or two. But regardless, right now, I'm cutting-edge technology, man, in terms of iPads. And as an iPad, it is fantastic. The display is beautiful. The peak brightness, I'm watching like Dolby Vision content on it. It just blows my mind. And I've got an OLED downstairs, which isn't renowned for brightness levels, but because it gets true black, the brightness still looks very impressive. But this thing is just insane. So I'm actually sat watching movies on it just for the Dolby Vision content. I'm sat there with my headphones and watching movies, which I never thought I expected to be doing, but that's been nice. And for reading draft books on it is very nice. I'm not going to say who. It's Tony's Revolution software book. It's, still in the works, going very well. Very good read so far. But so that's been very good for that. And of course, there's Apple Arcade if you subscribe to that. So I've been playing a few of the touchscreen based games on there. I've been playing Broken Sword 2 on there, which I'm guessing is like the iPhone version blown up, but a little bit more tablety optimized as a result.
It's certainly lower resolution than your iPad screen.
It is. It is. But I'll tell you what.
I think real life's actually lower resolution than the iPad screen.
there's less atoms flowing around.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I'll tell you what, the text when they're talking and the what was the addition that came, I think, after Broken Sword 2, that was more for when it came out as mobile devices, where we get the little picture of the character next to the text, which came after the original release of Broken Sword 2. They look really beautiful, much higher resolution. But I mean, I'm enjoying it. It's just nice to play point-and-click adventures, regardless on a touchscreen. So as a consumable device, as like a basic casual device, iPad Pro is beautiful, if a little bit overkill. So I wanted to dabble in this post-PC era, which was made such a big thing when particularly iPad 2 came out. It was all about this post-PC era. This is why we had Microsoft panicking and doing Windows 8, which it's mostly touchscreen optimized, which like you lost the start button, which sounds completely ridiculous now. So they brought that bit back quickly later on. But still, there was this mass panic that they thought iPad was going to generally replace laptops and PCs. Now, bear in mind, it's been a number of years. We're talking over a decade. They've had to fine-tune this thing to be a truly working workhorse device. And with an M1 chip in it, which is no slouch, you'd expect it to be really up to the task now. They're halfway there. They've got the power, they've got the display, even the 4 speakers sound magnificent on it. Apps are, there's one called Luma Fusion, which is a video editing app. And there's a video I edited, which was a clip from one of the early podcasts me and Tony did. And I took about 8 minutes of that and turned that into its own little video with some inserted snippets. That worked really well. And it encoded the video super quick. It was all perfect until I wanted to import footage. And that's when you start tapping into the file system of iOS. There's not really a file system. It feels all like a very fudged way of doing things. iPad Pro has a USB-C connector, so I plugged in an external hard drive. It's exFAT, which is fully supported on iPad Pro. Could I get this 3 gigabyte video file to transfer reliable? No. And it was all these little hiccups along the way. Now, maybe I'm still learning. There's things I have to do more specifically to get it to work how I need it. But I keep bumping into roadblocks, which is so frustrating. Go on, Aaron.
Absolute easiest way to do anything cross-platform on the Apple stuff is have your iCloud account and use your iCloud files. Basically just chuck everything that you're going to go on different machines on iCloud, and then it just pulls straight in. Yeah, and you can access it. If you do use it across to a PC, you can open up iCloud on a PC as well.
So there's definitely challenges ahead. But yeah, that sounds a good idea.
The thing is, it's like when like you said, when iPad 2 came out and the post PC era, that was mostly the press talking out of their behinds again. This is me trying not to swear.
That's very good. I appreciate that.
And the thing was, they had the generally right idea, but Apple were definitely not stopping doing the Mac. I mean, the Mac's selling more now than it ever did, but they did want to make, they have made the iPad more useful if that is your only device, but it is still designed around most of iOS stuff is now designed around having iCloud. A lot of the things people sort of say, oh, that's difficult. A lot of the people saying that tend to not have or use their iCloud account. And it's one of these little things that makes everything so much more useful, because you suddenly have a lot more things unlocked by it, because I suspect that whoever it is designing all these features at Apple is just default going to using everything off iCloud. It's the same thing with the lack of storage as well. A lot of it is basically because you don't normally have that much left on the device, and it's all just pulled off the net, which is a major problem if you're somewhere where you don't have decent broadband. And that's that was always a problem I had in the UK, because I was never anywhere with particularly brilliant broadband. Whereas where obviously in Cupertino they've got spectacular broadband, so they don't even think about it. Whereas the rest of us in the world are like, yeah, we're waiting for iTunes to be usable because we can't even download a song yet, kind of thing. And it's got better, but yeah, definitely everything is kind of focused around using your iCloud account. And the other question is, have you used it as a second screen for your Mac yet?
Yes. That didn't work too well either.
That depends on how.
So maybe I think there was a bit of conflicting going on because I had a Bluetooth headset connected at the time. It was fine until I did that. But unfortunately, in my work, this was the genius idea of mine anyway. My work laptop is also, funnily enough, an M1 powered MacBook Air.
Oh right, okay,
Okay,
yeah.
so that's the 13-inch version.
So you didn't need an iPad.
Well, it's my work one, as in it's works. It's not mine.
Indulgence.
So we have every month a collaboration day, which is, as we all work from home, it's our opportunity to get together, pair program, just collaborate basically, and have that opportunity to sit next to somebody, which when you're working from home all the time is one of those things you miss. So I thought, this is a beautiful little laptop, but I do miss having a second screen. I'll take the iPad Pro. And for a while, it was working pretty well. It felt almost like a native display connected rather than it being a wireless thing. But as soon as I plugged in these Bluetooth headphones, it just kept cutting out and doing stuff. And I thought, that's a problem because I actually use the headphones a lot to talk to clients while I'm on a collaboration day. So I can't have one without the other.
There is a solution.
There we go.
There's always a solution.
I should have spoken to you a week ago, but go on.
Yeah, a USB-C cable. Just connect it via USB-C. Which is using the older screen technology, connection technology that they had on the iPad before they did the new one where you could AirPlay directly to it and use it as a second screen. But it's basically means because I have the same problem with Bluetooth. If I've got my AirPods plugged in and trying to play music off my Mac while I'm using Unity does something horrible with Bluetooth and cuts out the music. So something's very broken in Unity's audio drivers internally that messes with all sorts. So I have to actually listen to music off my Apple TV while working on the Mac if I want to work with Unity.
Wow.
But yeah, a USB-C cable will generally solve that and has the benefit, of course, of keeping your iPad charged while using it as a second screen.
I am going to try all this.
Assuming your Mac's plugged into power. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
It's always worth messing about with that sort of stuff, yeah.
But that's it. You have to mess about. So if you get USB-C and they say you can plug a hard drive in there, you naturally plug in a hard drive and expect it to work. If it says it will support wirelessly a second display, you expect the second display uninterrupted to just work. It doesn't. And for years, I've been using laptops where, for the most part, please don't mention the microphone thing again, Tony. For the most part, it works, and I don't have to think about it. If I want a file and I want to drag it from here to here, I can do that. If I want to plug in a hard drive externally and drag a file from external to the internal storage, I can do that without thinking about it. I've been doing this for years. And it's not so much that the iPad Pro and iOS doesn't provide some software solution, and it's slowly getting better, but you just keep hitting, like I say, these walls where, why isn't this working? You've said this should work. I should be able to just plug this in. It should just do what I expect it to do. And hardware wise, it seems like it's just as powerful as the MacBook Air I'm using right now and that I use for my actual work. Why can't I just get a file from here to here reliably? The iOS just seems still so far behind what the hardware is now capable of, and that's the problem.
The one thing the Apple engineers always told me whenever I complained about anything is, it used to be Radar, it's now feedback.apple.com. They put in a bug report, because if there's no bug report there, they don't hear about it. And anyone can put in a bug report. It's worth it. They do read them, and the more people who actually put in bug reports on the same bug, the more that bug gets noticed. They definitely do a thing of more people have complained about this one, so we should probably fix it.
What did surprise me though was how well the Apple have their own keyboard and touchpad solution for the iPad Pro. It's hideously expensive. You could probably get close to buying like the standard iPad for the price of this keyboard touchpad stand thing. It's like over £300. I didn't go for that option. I went for the Logitech one, which was like less than half price. Really good. And the key touch is fantastic. The touchpad's fantastic. It does everything I need it to do. And it's just weird using it on an iPad. Works surprisingly well on that interface. So that combination works well. But again, you find as soon as you get into that mode, I kind of want a window interface. This split screen stuff, I say, okay, I want it over, this bit over to the right. That's probably my Twitter feed. On the left, I want to document or something else. And it's just a bit too fiddly to get what I need. Now, I'll probably be shouted at by people, not just on here, but elsewhere, by suggesting that, maybe now's the time to try a macOS dual boot on an iPad. Maybe that is just a stretch too far, especially for Apple. But we've got this far.
I'd love that just to be able to code, a lot of coders would love an iPad they could just basically run macOS on, so that they could run Xcode, Unity, Unreal Engine, whatever, just to actually just work on the same as they do with their Mac, and it's more portable. When the first solid state version of the MacBook Air came out, it kind of almost became the default coder MacBook overnight, purely because it was so easy to travel with. That was the year I went to WWDC, and everybody had suddenly switched to these super light MacBooks, purely because they were powerful enough to code on, and they were ridiculously light. So if you're traveling about, you're not lunking this great thing around. I mean, when I popped to the UK last week, I carried the flight out. I travelled light, which meant MacBook 16-inch case, my CPAP machine, and a backpack for like 2 days worth of luggage. Shopped at Primark as soon as I got there for the rest of the week's clothes to bring back with me, which I can't get in Spain. And then came back with a huge suitcase as well, but came back on the train. But carrying even the slightly larger laptop case, that weight, you notice it, and I do remember the good old days when I could just travel with my MacBook Air. And this is a nice little 11-inch MacBook Air, and it only got retired last year. And that's from... was it 2011 I bought it, and it was great, but it was just ridiculously light, ran everything, and it was nice, but just needed the power.
Understandably.
And the problem with the iPad is that they're in a difficult position, aren't they? Because you've got people like us saying, "Oh, put Xcode on it, put Unity on it, give us the file system," but then it just become, in other words, it just make it a Mac. I mean, either you put macOS on it, or you have to differentiate it somewhere. But then it's got so much hardware power that they can write sophisticated software for it. So what exactly is it, and what is it really for? And maybe it's gone too far already, and it shouldn't be editing video, and it should just be. Well, what should it be if that's the case? It's almost impossible to square, isn't it?
Well, that's it. Is Pro meaning it's a professional device, or is Pro meaning it's got all the singing or dancing specifications?
But the thing is, if you're really editing a load of 4K video, then why aren't you doing it on a proper Mac? That's the question, isn't it?
Honestly, I just like the idea of laying in bed and doing it.
Yeah.
And going, my wife's watching TV, I'm going, I'll just drop Erin on this timeline. I'll just drop Stoo here.
Yeah.
That's just a nice overlay. And
it's the convenience, isn't it? It's the convenience of being able to sit anywhere you like and just say, I mean, when I do little videos for me shop, and I put and I sit on my Android phone, and I just knock some quick videos up, and it's so quick. But if I do it on a PC, I've got to drag things in, and I'm playing with the timelines and audio, and it takes an awful lot longer to do that. But with the phone, I can just go, yeah, have that, scroll, do that. Just does it. And I can knock a video out in like 15 minutes, easy. Whereas on the PC, I'm like half an hour, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, you know. It's so it's that convenience of just being able to sit anywhere, even if you're on the loo and you think, oh, you know, or you're waiting for your wife to come out of the shops or something. She's gone in to pick something up. And you think, oh, you know, which I've done, or when I picked my son up from college, I've often sat and did some video editing in the car. You know, and like you were saying about the cloud, you know, again with the cloud, you can say, well, I've got all my files. I've got like a set of files which I use, like the basic ones, like for logos and things. I keep them in my cloud account all the time. So if I am in that position, then I think, oh, I'll pull that down, put it on the phone, use it, and then I haven't got to worry about having my phone clogged up with loads and loads and loads of files. So yeah, I think it's the convenience. But I think you're right, Tony. I think it's like, what are they? What point do they go? Do you know what? We've actually given you a Mac without a keyboard here. You know,
yeah,
and the funny, you know, it's hard, isn't it, to work out where's it going to go?
Well, that's it. It's a Mac with a touch.
And the funny thing is, they'd already invented that in the 80s. One of the prototypes I've got it somewhere. I've got this rather wonderful. A coffee table book of an Apple design, which has all the sort of stuff from the original Macintosh up to the last of the sort of beige Macs, and just as the original iMac was coming out. And one of the designs they have was gets referred a lot by Mac fans. This thing called Hollywood, which was basically a Mac that the screen is a flat screen which separates from the keyboard, and you can actually take them apart and use them separately. And the current iPad Pro with keyboard is basically the Hollywood design, but actually finally done. Yeah, it's one of these things. But I think the thing is with iPad is they seem to be very keen to differentiate iPad as purely as iPad, and iPad OS is now its own name rather than just being iOS now and so on. Purely because from the original iPad design, and I worked on the prototype iPads for software in top secret and had all sorts of fun trying not to tell, but having to not be able to tell you what I was working on kind of stuff, because you had to consider a lot of different aspects for the different thing. I mean, we were writing click fishing for it, so we couldn't do the take the phone version and do casting by throwing, sort of chucking your phone forwards, because it weighs nearly a kilo. That's gonna hurt if that comes flying off into your telly. And we actually mocked up the weight of it as a brick of stuff, just to get the feel of how it would be to work out how the game would have to work and so on. And Apple have done a lot of stuff on iOS and later on iPadOS in terms of this is primarily a touchscreen device that now does have mouse and keyboard, but that's only within the last year and a bit, isn't it? There's the official use of mouse and keyboard on it. So the OS is actually designed around touchscreen. And again, it's why the Macs won't ever have touchscreen, because macOS is not designed around touchscreen and probably never will. The crazy thing is that now iPad Pros are in one. Like you say, you could potentially run macOS on it. I mean, it wouldn't take much for Apple to do, but I do wonder if they're worried that it would confuse people.
Well, I'll tell you what is confusing then, on that same sort of vein. On macOS, you can run, if you've got the right hardware, iOS apps.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, again, that seems a very, to me, that feels less natural than putting macOS on the iPad. Given, I mean, if I kind of think to my Samsung phone here that if I plug in a USB-C device and it detects that it's a keyboard, or like an external display, it'll say, "Oh, I can start the Samsung like desktop like experience," which is not brilliant, but it's the fact it's on a phone and powered by the phone. It's quite useful at times to have that on a monitor. And I sort of feel like the iPad could go that extra mile. If you plug in a keyboard and mouse device and it detects that, will say, would you like to switch to macOS?
I think the thing there would be, like you said, it's not brilliant, but Apple doesn't like doing it's not brilliant, but.
iOS apps aren't that brilliant on macOS.
Well, no, because
they're designed for a touchscreen.
They're just simulations, yeah. But the whole thing is the other way around, putting macOS on an iPad where it's not designed to work on touchscreen.
But if you had a keyboard and mouse connected, it's essentially a MacBook
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, but then that might cannibalize MacBook sales. Yeah.
If they sell an iPad Pro, do they care?
Probably, yeah. MacBooks cost a lot more.
Look, this is all good discussions, absolutely. And I'm not saying that Apple should definitely put macOS, because in a way that's almost admitting defeat that iOS isn't up to the task. Well, iPad OS isn't up to the task to achieve what we need as pros. But still, you know, for the device it is, the hardware is beautiful. It's just, I feel like iOS has still got quite a way to go. Just needs to go that little bit further. I feel like it's getting closer, but it's still got that little bit further to go. There's no way. I mean, I'm finding myself, I've got my MacBook Pro next to me from 2013, and I've got my iPad Pro, and I'll get so far on the iPad, I go, I need to do this, and then I'll pick up the laptop. And that's the shame part of it.
Yeah, I know my brother Adam, once he got his iPad Pro, what was it, 3 years ago, I think it might be now, he got the pencil and had to go to see if he could draw on it and use it as an art device. And he actually switched to just using the iPad Pro rather than Photoshop on the Mac. You know, because he had a decent sized Wacom tablet and so on, but actually just prefers to use the iPad Pro now. A lot of that's to do with the pencil.
Yeah. You can do that. I mean, some things it does very well. I mean, like drawing is one of those things, and maybe video editing, they shouldn't have gone that way. You know, because
depends on the video editor. iMovie's rather good actually, because a lot of it's because it's cut down. It's simplified, which means that a lot of the problems you run into with overcomplication don't get in the way. I think Stoo's finding the same with editing video on the phone. A lot of the best phone video editing tends to be the ones that don't put too much in. It's not a PC app that's been made into a mobile app. It's a mobile app from the word go, and thus it just doesn't overload you. Once stuff gets too many features, it just gets too awkward to use. This
sounds like Excel.
I agree. I mean, that's I agree. I think it's the thing that for me, when I use the software I use, it's just quick, because it's been written for a handheld touchscreen device. Whereas if they tried to port something off the PC or Mac onto it, you'd be like, well, you know, there's no mouse, and there's all the interfaces designed for touch, and pinching, and all the stuff you'd expect to do. So I kind of get that. And I don't think. I mean, I edit very small videos on there. I'm talking like 15 seconds, 30 seconds a minute. But if I tried to do a bigger project on the phone, I think I'd probably go insane because the timeline would get so huge that I'd be forever scrolling and zooming in and out, and the tracks would be like zillions high, and it'd be like, no, far too much. So I think for that purpose, it does the job really well, you know. And I think maybe that's perhaps why with, say, like the iPad and the video editing, it's a specific purpose. It's not for you making your big, you know, multi-track, you know, documentary or mini film. Although you could probably try and do it with something like an iPad and that. But I think for quick, small videos, it's probably ideal. You know, does the job well.
Yeah. See, the thing is, if you pushed everything from macOS onto the iPad, then those nice simple apps are going to disappear, and they're all going to be pro what's-its with a million features, you know. So, you know, maybe what you really want, James, is a MacBook Pro running iPad software in the little windows, as you pointed out you could do, because then you'd have your nice simple software that's easy to deal with, and the proper file system beneath it.
That would have been great. But again, I'd fall into the same trap of, do I want the Pro or do I want the Ultra? I've got to have the best. Yeah. And that what looks like fairly reasonable would soon turn into, I couldn't justify that.
Yeah.
That's the problem. iPad Pro, there was at least some kind of ceiling there where I could go, anything more now is just daft. It's unnecessary. But with the MacBook Pro, you think, it's not really user upgradable. I've got to be clear that it's got to be this amount of RAM. Maybe I've got to future proof, and it just goes up and up. It's all the Apple ploy. Yes, the base model starts at this price, but if you really want something, you know, that little bit more useful, actual storage space you can use without running out every 5 minutes, then you need to spend that £400 more, sir. You want double the RAM to be future-proof for like the next 4 years? Oh, that's another £400, please, sir. And, you know, this is how it goes. So, yes, I'm sure absolutely, Tony, you're right. But I think I would have to break into my local bank to be able to afford the spec I would then end up with.
But at least, James, at least you don't wake up one morning and find that your Windows PC doesn't work anymore.
Oh, you got in there anyway.
Because it's upgraded. Because it's done an update overnight, and now all the drivers are screwed.
Well, that's it. I don't even think it's done
That
an
never
update.
happens.
I've got an external mixer, which you just plug in, and it just downloads the drivers, and that's it. You do nothing. You don't have to install manual drivers or anything. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it's been a Windows 11 update, it's just suddenly stopped working. I plug it into a Mac, it just works. Now, I don't think that's necessarily macOS versus Windows and all that stuff. Sorry, Tony. But definitely something's gone wrong with an update somewhere along the lines, and probably Windows is more susceptible to that than macOS. I'll give you that, Tony. I'll give you that. So yeah, hence why I'm on a Mac today. Because I didn't say to Tony on the second occasion, can't get the Windows drivers to work. This is all going wrong, Tony. What do I do? And of course, the answer from Tony is, you should have brought a Mac.
You see, I think everyone needs to understand. James is using a Mac today because his Windows computer is broken.
This is not going to be the title of the podcast.
Can I just say that I'm actually running a Linux laptop on this today? So I'm actually
brave man.
I'm even in the other camp today. So although my main PC is a Windows machine, which is it's all right.
So when it comes to your art, Stu, I mean,
Yeah.
are you a mouse man, or have you dabbled with the whole stylus thing?
Oh, I use a tablet. I use a tablet for illustration work. I did have a touchscreen tablet, but I found that I spent more time kind of. It's hard because I got so used to using just a standard tablet, like my Wacom tablet. When I went to a display, I kind of missed just being able to just draw. I think I got so used to looking at the screen and then drawing that when I went to a display, I don't know. It just didn't work for me at the moment. But I might get one again in the future and try again because I've evolved a bit since I last tried one. But when I'm doing pixel art, I do tend to use the mouse for everything pixel art wise. But any other work, I use a tablet for, like, you know, if it's digital art or illustration. And then if I'm doing sort of photo manipulation or post-prod stuff, then I use the mouse.
So for pixel art, is that more because the mouse will allow you to get to the square and click that literally the pixel? Yeah. Whereas if with a brush, it wouldn't quite work with pixel art.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the thing is, when I first started doing pixel art, it was D-Paint, so using the mouse was natural for doing pixel art. And I'm still back there then.
Going to go Yorkshireman here. You started with a mouse. You lucky. Yeah. No, I started with a joystick.
Oh, actually, I did. I used Koala Painter on the 664, and then I did actually do a couple of pictures on that with a joystick, which is bonkers.
Yeah.
Actually bonkers.
The early stuff we were doing on the Apple II, the problem was getting hold of a usable joystick, because all the stuff we were getting was third-party stuff. There were really, really nice professional ones, but they were like the price of the computer again, and you couldn't get it. And me and Adam we're definite amateurs at the time, so you'd buy this cheap joystick from down in Shamshir Po, and the basic way the Apple II was, it was always an analog joystick. It was a 2-port. Technically, it was actually 2 paddle ports, but you'd do a joystick which would just give you 2 analog feeds for X and Y. So it was getting a joystick that would calibrate, and I don't know if you remember any of the old analog joysticks. They always grotted up and went way out adrift, and no one actually did decent D-pads, and it was years until someone actually started chucking out cheap knockoff NES clone D-pads for the Mac, not for the Mac, for the Apple II, and they were technically, it was still the analog input, but it was a fixed resistor for each direction. And it was suddenly like, oh my god, I can actually play games properly, and I can, control the pixels properly for doing art. It was a big jump.
Yeah. I mean, I do remember when I first got Koala Painter on the 664, and again, like you say, the graphics tablet that came with it was so expensive. I just couldn't afford it. I was only like late teens, and I thought, well, and I ended up with. I mean, thankfully they put joystick support in, which is crazy to think you can draw like a bitmap image with a joystick now. And also along with the fact that the 64 could only have those 4 colours per tile, so you're battling all these obstacles just to get some graphics on the screen. But I managed to do it. But I mean, I look back and I think, wow, did we really go through all that pain to kind of nurture our art form, to where we are today?
Yeah, because people were doing whole intro screens with that style, with actually pixel by pixel. Imagine like an iPad Pro trying to do an intro screen for an iPad Pro with a joystick. It would take you longer than the universe has been existing so far just to fill it in.
Yeah. But I mean, to say that, I mean, I still do every piece of pixel art I draw. I mean, when I did James's, pixel portrait for the site, everything is drawn 1 pixel at a time. I don't have any kind of sort of shortcuts. It is literally every pixel is plotted at one at a time, and I'm surprised my poor mouse has survived, because I've done so much work with this mouse I'm on at the moment that I'm sure the micro switch is going to die soon, because it's just continued again, click 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 click, and the right button for delete. But you kind of do that, and obviously you can sometimes use a bit of flood fill and whatever, but everything is drawn 1 pixel at a time. So I can't imagine anybody. I mean, I've seen people do it, but drawing pixel art with a tablet or with a graphics tablet, imagine doing something on an iPad. I mean, I suppose you could do it with an iPad, but I don't think you get that kind of level. For me anyway.
I do. I mean, I'm not an artist by any stretch of the imagination, but I do for fun. I do some pixel art, and I use my iPad for that. Right. And I found a package that I liked, and I can basically zoom. You put 2 fingers on it and zoom them out, and then the pixels are huge. Tweak them, and then spin it around and down again, and it's that dynamism that I quite like. So I mean that works for me, but just because the last time I drew pixel art was on an Amstrad CPC, and it was at actual size, and that was like 30 years ago. So I've skipped a lot in the middle.
I think
a little bit of deep paint on the Amiga.
But it's what you get used to. I mean, I sort of honed my skills on deep paint, and I kind of settled into having my left hand on the keyboard for all the keyboard shortcuts, and then right hand on the mouse with left to plot and right to delete. But now I find that I've got the mouse wheel, so I can zoom in with that, and but I still use exactly the same technique as I did, all those years ago on the Amiga. Right hand on the mouse, left hand on the keyboard, lots of shortcuts. Very, very rarely use any of the menus at all. It's just all done with key control. So for me, if I did try to use a tablet, I'd probably find it really difficult, because I'm battling my own kind of work system that I'm so used to using. So, but having said that, I mean, everyone has their own way of doing things, So, for me, that works for me. But I can see why, for anybody else, it'd be like, well, I don't know if I can do that. It takes too long.
Well, it's the thing of effectively retraining muscle memory whenever it's a completely new system. Yeah, then again, it's also like Apple keeps bringing out loads of fancy new ways to do things on iOS and macOS and so on. I never bothered learning any of them. I'm still using stuff I probably learned on macOS 8, and it's like, oh, by the way, you've got that feature. Oh, right, okay, I've never used it.
Yeah, I don't know how the split window stuff works on an iPad. No idea.
Yeah.
So which iPad do you have?
There's a million shortcuts, isn't there? I have the last iPad Air, so it's like a year. It's like a year old. It's pretty hot, and it should last for donkey's years. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I've got the 5th gen iPad, which annoyed me because that's the last one that you can't use as a second screen on the new macOS. So I may have to update it. I was considering buying an iPad Pro purely to use as a screen if I'm using my MacBook outside. Because I do miss, like you say, not having a second screen is a bit of a jump, even with a decent screen size. It's just the being able to put the stuff you're not specifically focused on the other screen, and for instance, your code window or whatever on the main screen is a big productivity thing. It's
I think you get used to it, don't you? I mean, I've got like down here, I've got like my main machine, which is up there, which has got dual screen, and then I'm actually sitting at my art desk, but I've actually put another monitor in the corner, so I've got the laptop on it, so I can plug another screen into my laptop, and still, if I want to use both machines at the same time, because I get so used to having two screens. You know, like you say, you have one screen which is all your stuff that you're not really working on, but it's there for reference or whatever, and you have your main screen for doing all your work. You know, and certainly if I'm doing reference art, I use my right screen for all the reference art, and then I'll do the main drawing on my main screen. So, but I think I could never go back to a single screen machine again. It's like you get so used to having a dual monitor setup. Going back to single screen is like, oh no, I can't do that.
So you've never been tempted by an ultra wide monitor, which often you can get ones that's as big as two like 27-inch monitors just in one big thing.
Yeah, I was I was at Chris Wilkins' house a few months ago, and he's got a huge, like, wide, one of those big curved wide monitors, ultra wide ones. And I looked at it, and I thought, oh, could I use one of them? And I thought, well, I'm not sure, because you've still got, I suppose, with you've got dual screens, it fits to the screen boundary, doesn't it, for the monitor, so you can clip things in very quickly, like, you know, quarters or halves. But does it do the same thing on these wide ones? Does it actually say, we're going to pretend it's two screens joined together, and then you can click to the middle? And will it actually allow for that, or will it still kind of lock it to each quarter? So it'd be an eighth, wouldn't it? An eighth of the screen.
No, I think you can actually count it as two.
Right.
27-inch screens or whatever. The only problem I found with them is unless you don't mind it being only 1080p, they do get very expensive very fast. And the curved thing's a problem for me because my desk's got a decent amount of depth to the wall, but if I used a curved screen, I'd lose all that because it would actually curve out around. So at the moment, I've got two screens, although I'm going to probably readjust it all. I'd say two screens. I've actually got, I've got 5 screens at the moment because of multiple machines and Apple TV with its own display and and so on. Yeah, I only use 2 at a time typically. It's just certain scenarios I need to run another screen or run something else in parallel.
I have. I'm going to compete with you a little bit. It's not 5. Let's start with that straight away. It's not 5. For work purposes, my day job, my 9 till 5, I have 3 monitors. My poor little M1 MacBook Air is powering 3 monitors, and that's having to go through a dock because it typically natively will only do actually 1 external, which is one of the things a lot of people moaned about. So you have to have this dock, which then uses DisplayLink, which can get you the other 2. Could have 4 if I really was silly, but it's actually down by my feet, which is not that useful as a display. So I've just got 3 external monitors, and I've got like chat stuff going over here, working from home, that's useful. And whatever I'm working on directly ahead, and then like a reference bit over there. So I've got used to using 3. And once you get into that vein, it's very hard to drop down. You just get used to the extra workspace.
I've thought about upgrading and getting when I'm going to be renewing my machine later this year, and I did think about should I go for a 3 monitor setup, because I've heard people who say, like just like you said, that you get 3 screens, you get so used to it that going back to 2 screens is like, no, can't do that. So I am actually contemplating going that route, but I know that once I do, that's it. I'm going to be sold on 3 screens, and then it'll be like, oh, shall I have 4? Because I suppose you get so used to having, like, I'll drag that one onto that one, onto there, and it's all laid out how you want. And then when one's missing, you think, no, I can't. I'm so used to having all this everywhere. So
and the monitors don't all have to be in like a landscape orientation. So you could have, I mean, there's like fantastic stands now. You can get a monitor below, the same size monitor above it, and then the same size monitor then vertical to the side of them. So that the vertical one's probably great for, I mean, you guys will probably disagree with me or agree, have code on it or a web page displayed there on it. And then the other 2 just work as your natural workflows.
Yeah.
The possibilities are endless. And Tony's now thinking, what are these guys on about? I've got 1 external monitor. It's beautiful. It does me very well.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing is is having my primary monitor I use as my second monitor is a 4K monitor, I got a nice LG one that wasn't too expensive. The other one that gets used the most is I've got a 42-inch one fixed to the wall, which is also 4K, but that's primarily for the Apple TV. So I've got the option. I can basically AirPlay to it from the Mac and use it as a third screen on the Mac if I need to, or I can be running something else on it at the same time. Although again, a lot of the time, because of I mentioned the problem I have with Unity's audio driver messing up my headphones. Actually playing music on it, just running iTunes on it for my headphones is actually one of the things it ends up getting used as a lot. But it does mean I can switch, and that's sort of the other thing as well. It's with a lot of things like that. It's not like using them all the time. It's more of the convenience of being able to switch to it without messing up what you're running on this one. So my old iMac is running it as another setup to the side, which is one of my screens, and some stuff it's more practical to run on that. So I'm not basically getting stuff in the way on the screens on my MacBook. So it's more of a. It looks scary when you walk into a room with 5 monitors, but a lot of the time you're primarily focused on 2 of them anyway. But I struggle on less than 2.
And of course, most operating systems now have like multi-desktop views, so you can literally toggle. So even if you've got one screen, you can say, okay, I want to have a different view. Maybe I've got a work desktop, maybe I've got a gaming desktop, and just flick between them. Yeah. And everything's there.
Remember I mentioned not bothering to learn any of the new features that they bring along? That's one of the ones I've never actually got around to using.
I've dabbled with it, but I've not got used to it.
I'll just add another screen on,
Absolutely. So,
see, as you pointed out, James, I have one monitor, but I have about 20 desktops, and I just flick between them, and I find that works fine.
So how do you switch between 20 desktops? Are you literally manually plugging in and out, or have you got a little device that does that for you?
No. I mean, it's just.
macOS. I see. So, as in the multiple desktops within the operating system.
So different apps are on different desktops. So you're not got this Windows thing where there's a million windows all on the same damn screen. Yeah. So I find because of that, things are nice and neat and partitioned, and I don't need.
I
don't need a room that looks like air traffic control just to write some code.
Air traffic control looks so cool.
I remember I did actually go into a military air traffic control into a tower once, and realised the computers they were running air traffic on were 4-bit. In terms of the data they were using for the actual aircraft data was 4-bit. They could only handle 16 aircraft at once.
Wow.
When was that? How long ago?
That was in the 90s.
Okay, so there were probably strips. Were there strips on the wall?
No, they were only strips for backup scenarios.
Okay.
Basically. But then again, I consulted for a military training college, and they were using VAX mainframes to simulate the air traffic control tower, and Amigas to simulate the actual taxiing. So basically, the reason I got brought in because they were using Amos and Amigas on. I don't know if you remember, there was a really, really basic networking code you could get for the Amiga, which essentially took a bunch of data, copied it to a drive on the next Amiga along, and that copied it all the way around. And they had 32 of them in the classroom. And the data going from for this network code, which essentially simulated aircraft taxiing around, and these air traffic controllers learning where to put aircraft and how to tell them where to go, just by copying data from string to string around all these computers, by just literally copying it onto their drives, each frame. And it was kind of horrific. The problem they had was they all kept crashing, and that was because they were doing it as strings, and the strings were just allocating new strings every time they did it, and the garbage collection just turned up and just went, no. And it all fell over, and I taught them some basic tips on how to not do that, and it sorted itself out. But just it was interesting because the system was never designed for that kind of stuff, and they just sat down and didn't know any better, so they did it, and it kind of worked.
So, Aaron,
Amiga's a hot machine at the moment, though, isn't it? It's like everywhere you look, it's Amiga stuff.
Yeah, totally.
look at this.
It is, really is.
Look at that. Amiga magazine from the shops today.
It's
That
cool.
really
Isn't
sells.
it? It's very cool.
A real magazine. Oh yeah, Stu's in it as well.
I haven't actually looked through it yet because I'm so busy. I thought they sent it through to me, and because I've started writing a monthly column, like just one page in it, and I sent it through to me. I just went, oh cool, and I put it down and I've left it. And I've just so I've got a few of them, but I keep meaning to sit down and read them all because I just don't have the time. But it is really cool. It's really cool. These new magazines coming out, and they do another one called Pixel as well, Pixel Addict, which is pretty cool as well. I've looked through that one. But yeah, I like the fact that people are actually putting some effort into kind of keeping the scene alive in a way which sort of taps into that nostalgia that we all kind of have. Well, I certainly have.
Yeah,
it's nice to see. Yeah.
I think it's more than alive, though. I think it's growing.
It is. I mean, was it the people are releasing software for it still, which is great, and box software. So there's certainly enough of a market to kind of make it worthwhile looking at developing stuff for again. I don't know what the sales numbers are, but there certainly must be something in it for people to do it. But yeah, I love it. I absolutely love the fact that the Amiga's still going strong in 2022. Who'd have thought, eh?
Yeah.
So is that people who've used the Amiga back in the day, do you think, rather than anyone new suddenly discovering the Amiga?
I think a large percentage is basically old farts like us, but but I do think there's probably some new people who probably heard of the Amiga, when they got into playing sort of the sort of consoles and thought, well, I'll give this a go, and rediscovering the whole Amiga scene.
Okay, let me just make a note of that. 31st of May, 2022, first time James has been called an old fart. Okay, thank you. I've just got that
down.
Welcome to our world.
Well, I'm doing my token gesture, starting to go.
You'll get used to it. Yeah, you get used to it. Don't worry.
But do you know, it just surprised me that even now I've never actually owned an Amiga, and I don't know why at the time I went the Acorn Archimedes. It must have been it was the one in the catalogue. It was the one that seemed reasonably priced. It seemed to tickle the educational boxes, which meant Mum and Dad was going to buy it for me because it was a big event. I think it was £600 back then. And what would that be? Early 90s? And it just so happened that the school then adopted having an Acorn Archimedes as like the computer of choice. So that worked out for me. I knew what the menu, what the buttons on the mouse were: select, menu, and adjust. And because I knew that, the teacher went, I know I'm not going to have any problems with you, James. He was right, because I always used to finish first and ended up doing errands for the teacher. That was no fun. But anyway, and I feel like I've missed this part of nostalgia. It's like the Amiga was the one to have. There was the Atari ST, there was the Amiga, and there was the Acorn. Those were like the main three. And I seem to have I don't want to say the ugly little duckling or anything, because it was a great computer, no doubt about it. It's probably underrated, in fact. Maybe biased, but I don't know. But still, I think the Atari ST certainly had its charms, but the Amiga, because of just the way it had this extra hardware, that developers, when they really utilized it, could really make that thing sing and dance. And I haven't owned one.
The Acorn machine was superior. It was superior, but being superior technically is not.
Yeah.
It's not doesn't make you a commercial success, does it?
Yeah.
I mean, that if ever there was a lesson on computing, that has to be
the Archimedes, as with most of the stuff, most of the Acorn stuff, was very British, and it was very much only for sale in Britain, not for overseas sale kind of thing. I mean, a few people bought them overseas, but generally speaking, as soon as you go outside the UK, you'd not hear of it. And of course, the big game studios, while there was a lot of them in the UK, a lot of them were also in America, so for game stuff, the Amiga took off well for games because it was, once people got the hang of it, relatively easy to do really nice looking games for. The ST was actually rather good for games, but found its niche in music because even though it didn't have a very good music chip, it had MIDI.
And
that was it.
built
in, and it worked. The Amiga never got MIDI right, even with all the external add-ons. There were versions of things for it, but generally speaking, if you were in a music studio at the time trying to use an Amiga for music, you were either someone very, very radical trying to do something very, very different, or you're an idiot. And you just bought it for games, and just trying to make it work for music. Studios were using STs, Macs, or a few of them using PCs, and that was purely down to budget. Most of them would be using ST because it was a very good one to do on a low budget, and you could spend all your money on better outboard gear and stuff in the studio. If you're a very, very pricey studio, then it would be a Mac running everything. And that was usually a lot of the times because at the time a lot of studios were done as tax write-offs for ridiculously over rich musicians. A lot of bands suddenly got told by their accountant that they needed to blow some money quick, so they'd just build a studio and then write it off against tax and so on. And a lot of those studios just went very, very quickly. They went bust. But it was a fun time to be someone selling music gear.
I think when the Amiga came in was because the sound chip on it was so good. It was more the trackers, wasn't it? Where it was.
For games again, it was games led. You could do a really good soundtrack in a game on an Amiga without having to have anything extra, And this is before we had CDs or kind of MP3 kind of stuff for things. I mean, imagine the fact that how difficult it is to actually play back an MP3. That you couldn't just stream music on an Amiga that was compressed because it was just too heavy for it to do. It's.
I do remember. I do remember on a 486 PC trying to play back a 128 kilobit MP3 file and it's stuttering.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds crazy, man. I've got USB sticks from years ago that can play an MP3 file. Just it's like a stick with a built-in music player.
The dedicated 4-track digital recording system we used, this Roland one, to write the soundtrack for Jetstrike. We actually had 100 megabyte drive, and it could do 4 tracks just. And you had to be so careful to not run out of space because it wasn't compressing. It was actual full. I think it was 24-bit. So it's consuming huge amounts of data for the time for 4 tracks, and you could just about get a 3 to 5 minute song in it as long as you repeated a lot of stuff. And then what you do is once you've got that one track done, you then have to copy all the data off to a DAC machine. And then work on the next song on it because you could only really deal with one song on it at once, And nowadays, 100 megabytes, you could get quite a few songs on that.
Absolutely, and
Tony, and that was with a machine where its processor was dedicated to it,
Yeah, absolutely. Having that, well, I can remember having PCs like Pentiums where natively they couldn't play back MPEG-2, which was like what DVD used as the video format. And you'd buy a separate card just so that could be hardware accelerated. And then, of course, there was GPUs that came on the scene, which hardware accelerated 3D graphics. And there was always something, it's kind of what the Amiga did back in the day, where here's a processor that does this thing so well. Why does the CPU need to do it all? Here's the thing that can offload that. And it's that thinking it's really helped the PC. You look at the price of a GPU, it's almost as much as the PC you brought originally, particularly right now because of the shortages.
Yeah.
But Tony, as I've been reading your book, I'd like to pick out one thing. Broken Sword 1 and 2 were totally 2D affairs. And then Broken Sword 3 came along. And it was around this time where so many games, I think particularly publishers pressuring that it has to be 3D to be commercially viable. And I think playing games like Sam and the Sorcerer 3D fell very much into that. And then Broken Sword 3 came along as well. Now, I remember playing and reviewing this on the Xbox. I preferred the 2D ones in the terms of that's probably what I was used to. But there was still Broken Sword in there. But technically, how did you find that transition going from that 2D to 3D trying to adjust that thinking to that new perspective from how you work?
I guess I don't say, do I? Well, I escaped the start of the development to do GBA Sword, of course, which was like going right back down to basics again. You know, it was a super simple. So I mean, that's what I talk about. 3D. I mean, some. I mean, the whole, and as I do say, the whole market shifted part, and a lot of it was critic led, to be honest. And shop led, retail led. You had to be 3D, otherwise that you don't have enough boxes ticked to be viable. You know, it was like 2D is dead. The whole world has shifted to 3D, so it was kind of a rough time if you liked 2D. Thankfully, largely gone now. That kind of thinking, but. I mean, 3D. The problem with 3D was that you know so much more of your effort would go on the 3D itself than the game. So you know you could spend all your money and all of your time trying to make the damn character look good, or you know reduce the polygons, or make it soft skin, or get the bones working and cast the shadows. All these things took so much resource. And it was just the industry for many years. It was just a polygon arms race, you know, and that's all very well. But you know, we just wanted to write stories and design puzzles and have a narrative, you know, and all these things. So for us, it was a bit jarring, you know. For other people, it was their great opportunity. So and it suited them, and obviously a big industry grew out of 3D gaming, and that's still around. So. You know, for us it was bad, but then again, there were people in our office that were cock a hoop about it. You know, the 3D was what they wanted to do, but it never really worked for Revolution, I don't think.
And Broken Sword 5, ironically, is a mix of the two, where the backdrops are 2D, but the characters themselves have this like 3D essence about them, which I guess makes, particularly for the artwork, having a 3D character rather than a 2D sprite. It's probably easier with all the animation interactions and things.
Well, no, it is a 2D sprite.
There you go. That's fantastic.
If it's a model, it's drawn as a model and then snapshot into.
Well, that's even more impressive then. So there you go. It's pretty much gone back to its roots completely then.
It did in the end, yeah. And now you could write a 2D adventure game and no one would bat an eyelid, you know. I mean, you're never going to get a reviewer saying, "Oh, this is crap because it's 2D." I mean, that would just be insane, you know. No one would even.
It's
think
quite the opposite now. I mean, there's games being released which look 8-bit, never mind 16-bit. So it's sort of Nintendo original console style graphics.
There's games that are effectively 2-bit because that new the Playdate, of course, you know, the one with the handle. That Panic have done. That's effectively a 2-bit screen, isn't it? Or is it grayscale? I think it's a 2-bit, one or 2-bit screen.
You may have bit off more than you can chew there.
Yeah, I looked at it and I thought this will be fun. This will be a fun one to do stuff for, just the challenge of getting it to a thing.
Yeah.
And apparently, you know, they sold out every single one on pre-sales, but. You know, you are designing for effectively a good old-fashioned black and white screen, which it focuses what you have to do art-wise, I think.
And that's
but it might be a couple of scales of grey, which makes it even nicer. Yeah,
there was a definite snobbery around 3D when it had to be 3D.
Oh yeah.
But now we're kind of embracing every style there is. We've got the AAA titles. It's full 3D using all that GPU power. And then you've got sort of ray tracing, which is like the thing right now. But you've still got all these things in between now. And this real love for retro, which persists, which is great. And as you've said, it seems to be increasing in popularity rather than decreasing, which, you know, if we can share this enthusiasm and this style, and particularly the art style of it, and the technical abilities of these formats, and the limitations wasn't necessarily a barrier to imagination, because you looked for another way of describing or explaining that thing. 3D doesn't solve all the problems at all. And 2D did it very majestically in very clever ways. It was kind of 3D games before it was truly 3D as we understand it today, but they did it in a clever sort of way of presenting it with the technology they had.
I do miss the old days when stuff that you couldn't technically do in the game, you just worked out a way of explaining it in the plot in the inlay. There was so much stuff. Well, we can't have a baddie there, right? We'll just change the plot. Yeah, and there'd be an interesting plot in the inlay that would just set up the scene for exactly why you're walking into a medieval scenario with a gun. Because that's the only thing the artist could draw, or that's the only thing you could animate.
But I guess this harkens back to when adventure games was all text-based. Before we had anything graphical, it was just literally text on a screen. And when I think of the later versions of Broken Sword, like the Director's Cut thing, where they gave you the hint system, text adventures, you were just trying every combination possible, like pick up, lift up, look in, see, view, talk to.
Yeah. The Zork series won me over completely on that one. When I played, I think it was Zork 3, and you're underground. There's this giant, what's obviously a well, right? And there's a big bucket at the bottom of it, and it's very obviously a giant well, and you're supposed to somehow get into the bucket and get to the top of the well. And I could not work out the combination of words to make it do what I wanted to, and I was getting very frustrated. And I typed in "kick bucket," and he goes, "Okay, you are dead." And I thought that won it for me. I was so pissed off, but it was so funny because they deliberately put that in as at some point some poor sod's going to cite "kick bucket" and we're going to get him on it.
I mean, the thing about those games is they might have been text, but they were quite rich.
Yes,
a lot of things happened in them because it was easy to put content in. You could just shove in as much as you wanted. They were very sophisticated games.
Yeah, the next one's on from Zork, where they can't remember what they're called now, Sorcerer and Spellcaster and stuff like that. There's a sequence of 3 where you had spells, and once you learned to spell, you could pretty much use it anywhere. And of course, the classic one was Frotz, which was the light spell, and you could Frotz anything. And the first instinct when you come across something new is like, oh, there's a hellhound in front of you. Frotz hellhound. The hellhound has light glowing from it. And so they've just done it. They rigged into the system that, you can cast light. Okay, you can now cast light on anything in the game pretty much. And it may or may not be useful to you.
Well, gents, this has been an absolute pleasure yet again. Another fantastic Gaming Gadget podcast. I really appreciate you all returning for this one. Hopefully we can do this again sometime in the future. I really appreciate it, gentlemen. But for this episode of the Gaming Gadget podcast, goodbye.